I drove 9 hours through the worst blizzard Wisconsin had seen in 20 years, just to surprise Allison on her birthday. My fingers gripped the steering wheel as my truck pushed through snowdrifts that had already stranded dozens of cars along the interstate. Our 5 years of marriage had been mostly happy despite the recent distance between us. When I finally reached our home, I grabbed her favorite chocolate raspberry cake from the passenger seat, brushed off the snow, and quietly approached our kitchen window. That was when I heard her voice. God, I hope he crashes. I could use the insurance. Her sister laughed, or at least a few months of silence. They both erupted in laughter. If you are watching this right now, drop a comment telling me where you are from, and hit that like and subscribe button. Let me know if you would have done what I did next. The snow whipped against my face as I stood frozen by the kitchen window, the cake box growing damp in my trembling hands. What should have been a 4-hour drive had stretched into 9 grueling hours of white-knuckle driving through conditions that had closed most of the highways. Semi-trucks lay jackknifed in ditches, families huddled in rest stops. But I had pushed on, determined to make it home for her 35th birthday. I had been planning this surprise for weeks. Allison thought I was stuck at a business conference in Minneapolis until tomorrow. I had arranged coverage for my projects, packed her gift in secret, and coordinated with her boss to ensure she would have tomorrow off. The conference was real, but I had skipped the final day, telling myself that nothing was more important than being there to see her face light up when I walked through the door. We met 7 years ago at our mutual friend Dave's graduation party. I spotted her across the backyard, laughing as she played cornhole, her auburn hair catching the summer sunlight. She missed every throw, but laughed harder with each failure. I offered to teach her, and she accepted with a competitive spark in her eyes. By the end of the night, we were sharing whispered conversations on the porch swing, long after most guests had left. She gave me her number written on a dollar bill, saying I would have to spend it to lose it. Our wedding 3 years after that first meeting seemed perfect. 150 guests on a crisp autumn day, vows we had written ourselves, and her father crying as he walked her down the aisle. The photos still lined our hallway, smiling faces, preserved in time, everyone convinced we were the couple that would make it. The first signs of trouble had been subtle. Over the past 6 months, her kisses had grown shorter, her embraces less frequent. She had started having more girls' nights with friends. I rarely met, coming home later and later. When I asked about her day, her answers became vague, distracted. I told myself we were just busy going through a phase, that all marriages had their ups and downs. But standing there in the snow, the full conversation between her and her sister Natalie became painfully clear through the partially open kitchen window. I hope he crashes. I could use the insurance money to finally take that trip to Italy, Allison said with a chuckle that felt like ice in my veins. Or at least a few months of silence, Natalie replied. Honestly, how do you stand it? He talks about project management like it is actually interesting. I know, right? Allison groaned. So boring, so predictable. Leopold and his schedules and his 5-year plans. I swear sometimes I can predict every word before it comes out of his mouth. He is like a walking Excel spreadsheet, Natalie snorted. With about as much passion, Allison added, clinking her wine glass against her sister's. Remember when you wanted excitement? When you said you would rather die than live a conventional life? Natalie asked. Their laughter echoed through the window as my body went numb. The cold no longer registered. The heaviness of the cake in my hands seemed to increase until it felt like I was holding a boulder. My ears rang with their words, drowning out the howling wind. I felt nothing as I quietly walked to the front door, used my key, and entered our home. Their voices continued from the kitchen, unaware of my presence. With mechanical movements, I placed the cake on the counter next to them. Their conversation halted mid-sentence. Allison's face drained of color, her wine glass suspended halfway to her lips. Natalie's eyes widened in horror. I said nothing. There was nothing to say. I turned and walked out, leaving the front door open behind me, snow swirling into our entryway. The drive back to the hotel passed in a blur, the dangerous road conditions barely registering in my consciousness. Somehow I made it to a roadside motel without crashing. Perhaps I should have, I thought bitterly. It would have given her what she wanted. I did not sleep that night. The thin motel blanket did little to ward off the chill that had settled deep in my bones. Her words played on repeat in my mind, a nightmarish loop I could not shut off. By morning, I had made a decision. Confronting her immediately would lead nowhere productive. I needed time away, to think clearly, to decide what our marriage actually meant to both of us. My phone had been buzzing constantly since I left the house. 27 missed calls from Allison, 14 from Natalie. Text messages flooded in, first angry, then increasingly panicked. Leopold, where are you? Answer your phone. This is not funny. Come home now. Please just let me know you are safe. We need to talk about what you heard. I sent a single message. I am safe. I need time. Do not contact me. Then I turned off my phone. The roads had been partially cleared by morning, making the drive back to our neighborhood easier. I waited until 9:30, when I knew Allison would be at her marketing firm. Our neighbor Frank waved as I pulled into the driveway, completely unaware that my life had imploded. I nodded back, maintaining the facade of normalcy. Inside, the cake still sat on the counter untouched. I moved efficiently through our home, gathering clothes, toiletries, important documents. In our home office, I found myself opening her desk drawer, looking for anything that might explain the stranger my wife had become. A stack of credit card statements revealed shopping sprees at stores. I had never heard her mention charges for weekend getaways. She had told me were work retreats. Her phone backups on our shared computer contained texts with Natalie planning outings on weekends she had claimed to be visiting our sick aunt. Who was this person? Had I ever really known her at all? My coworker Ryan had recently divorced and understood immediately when I called asking if he knew of any short-term rentals. He offered his brother's vacant apartment available for at least a month while his brother worked overseas. By evening, I had a temporary home, sparse but functional, and the beginnings of a plan. I threw myself into work that first week, volunteering for every challenging project, staying at the office until security did their final rounds. My boss Thomas noticed but asked no questions, simply nodding with understanding when I requested a week of accumulated vacation time for the following month just in case. Allison progressed from angry texts to hourly voicemails. Her messages evolved from defensive to desperate. This is ridiculous. You cannot just disappear because you overheard one conversation. Leopold, please. What you heard, it was not what it sounded like. We were just blowing off steam. I miss you. Please come home. I did not mean any of it. I swear. I love you. Please give me a chance to explain. I moved through the stages of grief at hyperspeed. Shock gave way to searing anger, then to a hollow sadness that seemed to have no bottom. I lost 8 pounds that first week, food turning to ash in my mouth. Sleep came in fitful bursts filled with dreams of car crashes and Allison laughing as ambulance lights flashed. By the weekend, our friends had gotten involved. My best friend Jackson came to the apartment with beer and pizza, letting me vent without judgment. Her friend Taylor called me 6 times, leaving increasingly hostile messages about how I was overreacting, how all couples said things they did not mean when alone. I blocked her number after the 6th call. During the second week, I established new routines in my temporary life. Morning runs along unfamiliar streets, coffee at a cafe where nobody knew my name, lunch alone with books I had always meant to read. I consulted with a divorce attorney just to understand my options, the mere act of sitting in that office making everything more real. The lawyer, a woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude, laid out the process clinically, giving me a framework for a decision I was not yet ready to make. 16 days into my self-imposed exile, Jackson asked me to meet him for lunch. I almost declined, having grown somewhat comfortable in my isolation, but something in his voice suggested urgency. We met at a diner halfway between our offices, the kind of place with bottomless coffee and waitresses who called everyone honey. Leopold, I need to tell you something, Jackson said after we had ordered. I saw Allison yesterday. My stomach tightened. Did she send you to plead her case? No, nothing like that. I ran into her at the pharmacy. He hesitated. She looked terrible, man. Lost weight, dark circles under her eyes. But that is not what I wanted to tell you. He explained that while waiting for his prescription, he overheard Allison speaking with the pharmacist about anxiety medication, specifically about side effects and potential alternatives. The pharmacist had mentioned that the particular medication she had started 3 months ago occasionally caused personality changes in some patients, including irritability and impulsive behavior. Did you know she was struggling with anxiety? Jackson asked gently. I had noticed her seeming more stressed, having trouble sleeping, but she had dismissed my concerns, attributing everything to work pressure. She had never mentioned seeing a doctor, much less starting medication. Another secret in what was apparently a marriage built on them. Later that afternoon, I received an email from Natalie, the first contact from her since that night. Unlike the barrage from Allison, this message was measured, apologetic. Leopold, I understand if you never want to speak to me again. What you overheard was inexcusable, and I am deeply ashamed of my part in it. But there is context you should know. Allison has been struggling with severe anxiety for months. The medication she started has affected her terribly, making her say and do things completely out of character. That night she had mixed the medication with wine, something her doctor had explicitly warned against. I should have stopped her, not encouraged her venting. This does not excuse what was said, but please know the sister I was talking to that night is not the Allison I have known my entire life, and certainly not the woman who has loved you so completely for 7 years. I stared at the email for a long time, conflicted about how to respond. Did this explanation excuse the words that had cut so deeply? Did it matter that they might have been amplified by chemicals and poor choices? The pain felt no less real, the betrayal no less complete. Yet I could not deny that the woman Natalie described, the sister she had known her entire life, aligned more closely with the Allison I had fallen in love with than the cold, callous woman by the window. After 3 weeks of silence, I agreed to meet Allison at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown. Neither of us frequented. I arrived early, claiming a table in the corner, rehearsing what I would say. When she walked in, I almost did not recognize her. Her vibrant auburn hair hung limp around her pale face. She had lost as much weight as I had her clothes hanging loosely on her frame. Her hands shook slightly as she approached. The conversation started stiffly, both of us choosing words with painful precision. Her eyes filled with tears almost immediately. I have been living in hell since you left, she said quietly. Every day waiting for you to come home or call a divorce lawyer. Either would have been better than this limbo. I did consult a lawyer, I admitted, just to know my options. Her face crumpled, but she nodded. I understand. I would have done the same. Slowly, painfully, she explained everything. The anxiety diagnosis 6 months ago, hidden out of pride and fear. The medication that had helped at first then gradually began changing her. The mood swings, the impulsivity, the growing disconnect between her thoughts and words. I should have told you everything from the beginning, she acknowledged. Instead, I tried to handle it myself, and in doing so, I pushed you away, made you think I did not care, that our marriage did not matter. Those words by the window, I said, my voice tight with the memory, about hoping I would crash, about my life insurance, about silence. I will never forgive myself for those words, she whispered. They were not true, not one syllable. I do not know why I said them. It was like watching someone else use my voice. The medication, the wine, my frustration with myself. Not you. Never you. I want to believe that I told her honestly. But they came from somewhere, Allison. She nodded, wiping tears. There is truth in that. I have been struggling, feeling trapped in my own mind. But I projected all of that onto our marriage, onto you. It was easier than admitting I needed serious help. I am getting that help now, she continued. New medication, intensive therapy twice weekly. I am not asking you to come home yet. I know I have destroyed your trust, but I am asking for a chance to show you who I really am, who we really are when I am healthy. Something shifted inside me during that conversation. The ice that had encased my heart for 3 weeks began to crack just slightly. I still cared for her despite everything. Perhaps that was the most painful realization of all. We agreed to a formal separation with clear boundaries. I would remain in the temporary apartment. We would meet once a week in public places. She would continue her treatment. I would begin therapy of my own. No decisions about our future would be made for at least 2 months. As we parted, she touched my hand briefly. Thank you for meeting me, for listening. It is more than I deserve. No, I corrected her. It is exactly what we both deserve. The truth, however, painful. Over the following weeks, I immersed myself in understanding anxiety disorders and medication effects. I read medical journals, joined online support groups for partners of people with mental health challenges, and consulted with a psychiatrist friend about typical and atypical reactions to various treatments. Knowledge became my shield against uncertainty, a way to process what had happened without drowning in emotion. My own therapy sessions proved surprisingly valuable. Dr. Winters helped me examine not just the immediate betrayal, but the patterns in our marriage that had allowed secrets to flourish. My tendency to accept surface explanations rather than dig deeper. My focus on work as an escape from emotional complexity. My belief that love meant fixing problems rather than sitting with discomfort. Allison committed to her recovery with determination that reminded me of the woman I had first fallen in love with. She switched to a different medication with her doctor's supervision. She attended therapy religiously, sometimes twice a week. She joined a support group for professional women dealing with anxiety disorders. Most importantly, she began sharing everything with me during our weekly meetings, bringing her therapy journals, explaining her triggers and coping mechanisms, answering my questions with unflinching honesty. After a month of separation, we had our first dinner together at a restaurant halfway between our two temporary homes. The conversation flowed more easily than I had expected, though we carefully avoided certain topics, creating a fragile bubble of normalcy that felt both comforting and artificial. Before agreeing to further steps toward reconciliation, I established clear boundaries, complete honesty about medical conditions and treatments. No private conversations with Natalie about our marriage, couples therapy in addition to our individual sessions, a financial plan that included shared visibility into all accounts and expenditures. These were not punishments, but necessities for rebuilding what had been broken. Our first couples therapy session with Dr. Rivera was brutally difficult. Allison broke down completely when describing how she had felt in the grip of anxiety like drowning while everyone around her breathed normally. I admitted the depth of my hurt, the way her words had shattered my fundamental understanding of our relationship. Dr. Rivera guided us through the painful conversation with firm compassion, establishing frameworks for healing that seemed impossibly distant, but at least gave us a map. Trust rebuilt slowly in small moments. Allison calling when she said she would, following through on commitments, sharing medication changes before making them, my gradual relaxation of the protective walls I had erected, my willingness to be vulnerable again despite the risk. We started having dinner together twice a week, then 3 times. We went to a movie sitting with careful space between us, but laughing at the same moments. 6 weeks into our careful reconciliation, I overheard Allison on the phone with Natalie while picking her up for dinner. My heart rate immediately spiked, memories of that snowy night threatening to overwhelm the progress we had made. But the conversation I heard this time was different. "I know you are trying to help Nat, but Leopold and I need to work through this on our timeline, not yours," Allison was saying firmly. "And no, I do not think couples retreat would solve everything magically. We are doing the hard work day by day. That is the only way forward." When she saw me in the doorway, she immediately told Natalie she would call her later, then explained the conversation without my having to ask. Natalie had been pushing for faster reconciliation, suggesting quick fixes that Allison now recognized were superficial. In the past, we might have let this moment pass without acknowledgement. I might have swallowed my concern, she might have minimized the conversation. Instead, we talked it through completely there, in her living room, dinner plans temporarily forgotten. I shared my immediate reaction of fear and suspicion. She validated those feelings while providing full context. We navigated the potential conflict with the tools our therapists had given us, emerging closer rather than further apart. As we approached the 2-month mark of our separation, I found myself reflecting on what marriage truly meant. Not the fantasy of perfect harmony I had once imagined, but something more complex and ultimately more valuable. A relationship between two flawed humans who choose each other daily, who build systems to compensate for individual weaknesses, who forgive without forgetting, who grow alongside and because of each other. Marriage, I realized, required active maintenance rather than passive faith. It demanded honesty, even when the truth was ugly. It thrived on clear eyes rather than blind devotion. Allison's mental health challenges had not created the cracks in our foundation. They had merely revealed them, giving us the painful but necessary opportunity to rebuild something stronger. We developed new ways to support each other. I learned to recognize the subtle signs of her anxiety flaring before she even noticed. She became attuned to my tendency to retreat into work when emotionally overwhelmed. We established check-ins that went beyond superficial questions about our days, creating space for uncomfortable truths and uncertainty. Slowly, cautiously, we began planning a future together again. Not with the naive optimism of our early relationship, but with hard-won wisdom and carefully designed safeguards. 3 months after that snowy night, I moved back into our home. We redecorated together, creating a physical space that reflected our new beginning, rather than preserving the shell of what had been broken. The words spoken by the window that night will always exist between us, a scar that marks but no longer actively wounds. Forgiveness did not mean pretending the injury never happened. It meant choosing to build something new on ground that had once been scorched. It meant recognizing that people contain multitudes, that a single moment does not define a shared history, that growth requires acknowledging darkness rather than just celebrating light. Life is rarely as simple as fairy tales suggest. Sometimes the person who hurts you most is the same person who loves you best. Sometimes healing comes not from escaping pain, but from moving through it together. Sometimes the strongest relationships are those that have been broken and carefully, intentionally repaired. If you have ever faced betrayal or needed forgiveness in your own life, I would love to hear your story in the comments below. What helped you rebuild trust? Was there a relationship worth saving that you walked away from, or one you fought for that ultimately could not be saved? Remember to like this video if my story resonated with you, subscribe for more real-life experiences, and share with someone who might need to hear that healing is possible even after devastating words are spoken. Thank you for listening, and remember that sometimes the hardest storms lead us exactly where we need to be.